Funding for this podcast is provided in part by the IPM Network through the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture and by various commodity groups through checkoff dollars, including the United Soybean Board, National Corn Growers Association, and Cotton Incorporated.
The ICDeadPlants podcast shares the stories of people and plants, pests and pathogens, and the conflicts among them. Join us as we speak to the folks who attempt to solve complex problems with plants through pest management research. ICDeadPlants is an extension-based podcast created by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center and hosted by Ed Zaworski.
Welcome back to the ICDeadPlants podcast, folks. As always, I'm your host, Ed Zaworski. Today, we're going to be talking Soybean Cyst Nematode, which we've talked about before, but we're going to be talking a little bit different. We're going to be talking about the SCN Coalition, and I've got Dr. Sam Markell here from North Dakota State University. How you doing, Sam?
I'm great. It's good to be here, Ed. Good to see you again.
So Sam was previously on the podcast. We talked sunflowers, and that was a really good one. Sam, do you want to give my listeners kind of a little bit of information about yourself, a little bit of background, just if they didn't listen to it? If you didn't, go check it out. Sunflowers are really cool. I heard a lot more about them today that I'm excited to talk with Sam about in the future and some of his colleagues. But Sam, give a little bit of an introduction for yourself.
Yeah, so I've been at NDSU for almost 18 years. I'm an extension plant pathologist, and I'm a professor as well. So I have the luxury of working on 8 different crops, or at least when I started. Now I'm primarily focused on 7. So North Dakota has a lot of crop diversity. And so that's soybean, sunflower, canola, lentil, chickpea, flax, field pea, dry edible beans, all the market classes of that, and canola. So it's a lot. So I love what I do. We've got a great team of people up there. And we do a variety of things.
Keeps you on your toes, I bet.
Yeah, it does. It does. And North Dakota's got a lot of geography too. So those crops spread over millions and millions and millions of acres. So little bit of road time, but we've got great growers, and I feel like the ag community is really strong, and we've got great support with commodity groups, so it makes it really fun.
I think that's a pretty cool fact about North Dakota that I don't think a lot of people realize. I don't think a lot of people know about North Dakota, and I certainly bet they don't know that it's got a diverse cropping system up there. So
yeah, I think we lead the nation in 8 crops and honey. So it's a lot. What about North Dakota lends to that diversity? Is it changes in landscape? Is it changes in soil type? Is it just... Yeah, aside from having amazing farmers that can grow lots of things,
okay,
we're kind of unique in a position in the U.S., right? So we're north central U.S., right on the Canadian border. We have a climate that allows us to grow soybeans, corn, right? Kind of more southern crops, if you will, but also a climate that it's really tends itself to canola, a very northern crop, field peas, and we're dry in the west, so we can grow things like chickpeas. So we have a variable climate, but it's really good for a variety of things depending on where you're at in the state. Gotcha.
How did you end up in this crazy field of plant pathology, Sam? And how did you end up in North Dakota?
So I'm originally from Minnesota, and I kind of had 2 lives in Minnesota. I was on a small farm for my first 10 years, and in Minneapolis after that. And in Minneapolis, I played football and many other things in high school. Well, my whole coaching staff came from North Dakota State. Okay, so I didn't even know what North Dakota State was.
Yeah.
So my first go around at North Dakota State was as a football player. So my coaches were like, you're going to be a Bison. You're going to do that, and they would literally take mail from other universities and toss it in the trash, so I would never even see it. So, it was great. It worked out great. So my first go around into NDSU, that's how I found NDSU. And after deciding that I was not going to be an engineer, I wasn't going to do that, I went into biology, and I loved it. And I loved in particular ecology. And so from the ecological, classwork and kind of brains kind of met with my farm background, and plant pathology is kind of like just ecology that, really helps farmers and makes sense.
Yeah.
That's where I learned it. So I went away, did a PhD at Arkansas, and then ended up being hired back at NDSU the second time.
Was it like, they remembered you? You were such a good football player that they were like, we got to get this guy back.
Well, whether you're good or not, I was an offensive lineman. So no, It actually, it is funny, NDSU is, they're kind of a powerhouse in the level that we play in, and there's a lot of people that follow it pretty closely. And so I was actually surprised how many people actually remembered me. Being an offensive lineman, you're not exactly, standing on the podium a lot, so to speak.
I do remember, I interviewed another, NDSU professor, Dr. Julie Pashy, a while back. And I remember reading an article about the two of you as alumni athletes that came back. Cause maybe tell me if I'm wrong. Did she play volleyball?
She's excellent. She is, she's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. She's, I think 2-time All-American. She's a fierce competitor. Yeah. So the plant pathology, we're not a huge department, but we've got multiple former college athletes. 2 of them happen to be from NDSU itself. So.
Fun fact, folks. And I'm going to cite this podcast to my wife that I can actually remember stuff.
Good. Well, tell my wife that too, would you?
Okay, you heard it, folks. So, getting into SCN and the SCN coalition, just Sam, can you give us like a little blurb about soybean cyst nematode? If someone's listening and they've never heard about soybean cyst nematode, which it's hard to believe at this point, but I know there's people that don't work in soybeans, obviously, that listen to this podcast. Give us a little bit about like, what is SCN? Why is it important?
Yeah, soybean cyst is the number one yield limiting biological agent of soybeans. So causes more yield loss than any other disease, any other insect, any other pest. And it actually causes more yield loss than maybe the next 2 to 3, diseases combined. And it happens to make yield loss from a few of those other diseases worse. Sundust syndrome, for example. So it's a parasitic worm, right? And you kind of think of it as like a human tapeworm or something, right? So humans can run around, they do all kinds of things. And if you have a tapeworm, I'm sure you don't feel good, but you don't die. You can still do your normal thing, right? And you're infected. Well, you're just not going to be as thrifty and healthy and vigorous. And that's exactly what SCN does to soybeans. It's not going to kill the soybean necessarily, but if you have this parasitic worm living on the roots of a plant, the plant is just not going to do as well. And so it's kind of like hard to find, hard to see, and it's spread across the whole U.S. and into Canada in the soybean growing region, and it just takes yield like nickels and dimes it to death. So I think it's probably in several hundred counties in the U.S. It's in it's in every major soybean growing state, and it's in Ontario, it's in Manitoba. It's just continued to spread throughout the U.S. and cause problems.
I'll definitely post a bunch of links with regards to SCN, but I mean, Greg Tilka here at ISU has this great graphic that shows the spread over time of SCN. It's like and it's in red too, so it looks extra menacing. What is the history of SCN in North Dakota? Because it's relatively new compared to SCN as a whole body of work, right?
Right, it really is, yeah. And so it's probably good for people listening to understand too that soybeans are relatively new to North Dakota. Sure, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So soybean acreage in North Dakota, I know we had soybeans in the 80s a little bit in the southeast corner, the warmest, wettest corner. Soybeans could grow a little bit. And it went from 250,000 acres to 7 million over the last couple decades. And soybean cyst kind of follows the crop, for lack of a better term, right? You have a parasite living on a plant. You have to have the plant there for the parasite to actually, survive and thrive. So soybean cyst was found in North Dakota for the first time in 2003. It was in that southeast corner. It probably had been there maybe since the late 90s, we might assume. Undiscovered, right? Yeah. People weren't looking for it, that sort of thing. And now it's in over half the counties in the state. We have some of the highest levels in the U.S. It's expanded great. And we have a really good climate for SCN. We have a lot of sandy soil, a lot of high pH. It's just perfect.
Are there any particularly unique challenges with SCN in North Dakota specifically compared to some of the other soybean growing states?
Yeah, we have at least one, and that's dry edible beans. So so North Dakota is the number one dry bean producing state. Yeah. So dry beans are pintos, navies, blacks, the beans that you would just, get in a bag or a can and eat. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the North Harvest region, which is mostly North Dakota with a little bit of Minnesota, I think it's 750,000 acres of dry beans. and they're produced in an area where SCN is starting to spread, and they are the only other real crop host around.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So, and I'm not sure they're as susceptible as a soybean per se, a soybean with no resistance anyways. But yeah, the SCN can survive on both those crops.
Interesting.
So that makes it particularly challenging.
I know Sam and I were in a meeting earlier, and he was talking about like a typical, whatever you want to say, rotation within a particular grower's field in North Dakota. You said what, up to 4 crops in rotation?
Yeah, up to 4,
that makes
sometimes 6.
Tricky.
Yeah.
So like, what is the typical soybean grower? What does their typical year-to-year operation look like? Are people growing soybeans rotating up to 4 crops?
Yeah, and it totally depends where you're at in the state. So that's a really interesting thing. So in places in the really far southeast corner, they can grow soybeans and corn, just rotating like a lot of the I states, right? But there's some other crops that are really high value that we can grow in the east, especially the northeast. So we have a lot of sugar beets. We've got a lot of dry edible beans. And you start bringing in more of those crops to rotate, right?
Yeah.
And then in the central part of the state, you can grow all kinds of things. So you can grow soybeans and corn and wheat and field peas, and maybe there's some dry bean production. And then you have a whole bunch of sunflower production through the middle. If you're in the north central, there's a lot of canola. So, and then we also grow barley, so there's a lot of good crops that we can grow. One of my former grad students who's from a farm in central North Dakota, they have 6 crops. That's what they do. And it's great. I mean, from almost any perspective in agriculture or agronomy, that's a great thing to have that many crops.
Do you guys in North Dakota see success in managing SCN with these long-term rotations, or is it?
Yeah. So we're working on the success part, right?
Gotcha.
So the SCN that is really hot right now is still in the southeast, and that's where we probably would be rotating the least, and that is problematic. And that's in the dry bean growing area, or at least part of it. So that adds a degree of complexity.
Gotcha.
But I think in the central part of the state, once SCN flares up pretty hot, I think we're going to be able to deal with it, more effectively than maybe if you're just corn and soybeans.
Interesting. North Dakota is an interesting system to me, I think, in general, but man, that dry bean thing really throws a...
Oh, and I love dry beans. I mean, there's all kinds of great things about dry beans, but they are kind of sickly. As far as pathology goes, there's a lot of diseases that can hit them. And we were really unfortunate that SCN just is moving into that area.
I'm filing this away for future podcasts, because I could probably spend a whole podcast talking about dry beans.
I'd love to talk about dry beans.
Diseases,
they're
and
a great crop. Yeah, they're a great crop.
SCN coming in. So, but I want to get to the coalition. So what is the SCN coalition, Sam?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a huge question. I think I'm going to start with to say that it is a public-private partnership whose mission is to manage SCN.
Okay.
And so public-private partnership. Well, what is that? Okay.
Yeah.
Public-private partnership, in the true sense of the word, it basically means when the public and the private sector work together for a common purpose, right?
And when you say the public and the private sector, who are you talking about?
Right. So the private sector, we would talk about ag chem companies, Corteva, BASF, or maybe we can talk about elevators, and maybe the ag media is a part of that. But what I'm talking about primarily is the ag chem companies and to some degree the ag media. The public sector, I would say, would be the universities or maybe the State Department of Ag. And then you have kind of like this almost middle ground a little bit with the soybean checkoff, right? So it's a little different than both of those things. And so what the SCN coalition is a specific group, a specific mission-driven group that's trying to help manage SCN and trying to really move the needle on SCN. And the SCN coalition has been incredibly effective in doing that. Okay. So a little bit of history too that I think might be important is that years and years ago, so specifically in the mid-90s, SCN was moving across primarily the I states, causing a lot of problems into southern Minnesota, maybe into the mid-south. And there wasn't a lot of focus on it at all. And Greg Tilka at Iowa State here, he was the brains behind this first SCN coalition in the 1990s. And what he did is he took he worked with the Soybean Checkoff. The Soybean Checkoff really funded this, but then he worked with a public relations firm, a marketing company. And then together with the marketing company brought in the private sector people we're talking about. So this would be the Pioneers of the world, or the Syngenta, wasn't Syngenta at the time, but the private sector companies. And they created a bunch of messaging. And this was, like traditional print advertisements, but also kind of cool things. Like they had this 1-800 SCN test or something, a hotline that a grower could call. And they had a lot of radio presence through the ag media, kind of this leveraged marketing. And their whole goal was to increase the awareness about SCN and increase soil testing among growers. So the way you find if you have SCN is you soil test. So their logo was take the test, beat the pest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've heard it.
Yeah. Take the test, beat the pest. Yeah. And it's all about getting a soil sample done. So anyways, the SCN coalition of the 90s was fairly short-lived and very effective. So there was market research or, survey type things that were done that showed that the growers' learning went way up. And then all the data from all these soil testing labs just absolutely skyrocketed it. And it was because of this SCN coalition. So it was this early partnership that started and ended in the 90s. And it had one kind of focus, and that was, increase awareness and get soil samples in. And after that, growers started managing SCN. It was very successful.
And then it went away for a time. What happened after that?
Yeah, so that's where the story actually gets a little more interesting, I think. So the SCN coalition disappears in the late 90s. Growers are managing SCN. There's some genetic resistance around this PI 88788 that your listeners may have heard of in a different talk. It doesn't matter the name. That's not really important. But
the main mode of resistance.
Yeah,
right?
it's basically the same mode used on 95% of the soybean varieties and across the whole U.S. So as you use the same thing over and over and over on, 60, 80 million acres of soybeans, depending on the year.
Yes.
Well, it's a remarkable thing. The nematode will adapt. So what happened, you have three things going on. So between 1999 and maybe 2015, let's just say 2015.
Sure.
You've got SCN continuing to spread all across the U.S., right? It gets to states like mine in North Dakota, midway through that time period. And then you have the nematode adapting to this genetic resistance. All of a sudden, it's not working as well. And the kicker is that you don't have the same educational platform going on. So the SCN coalition's done. There's not these radio advertisements. There's not these things that are out on extension, wireframes, and the ag media is not covering it. So the growers are managing SCN less, even though it's becoming a much greater problem.
Have you ever wondered how much yield you lost in past years due to pest and pathogen issues? Now you can access expert estimates using the CPN Field Crop Disease and Insect Loss Calculator. Just enter the crop, year, and diseases you saw in the field and your location.
It's really interesting. I was telling Sam as we walked over to the recording studio here, like I worked on SCN for my master's, and yet I didn't know a lot about the history of the coalition, right? I didn't know that there was a previous form of the coalition and that it's been revived. So you said it was really successful early on, and you got that message out, take the test, beat the pest. So it sounds to me like a lot of people, got educated, they took the test, they instituted some genetic resistance in their crops to fight SCN. And I'm assuming it was a success at first, and then just over time, especially, you mentioned SCN being this sort of to use the same analogy, this tapeworm that you can't see. And that's what makes it a difficult pest to deal with, I think. But then eventually people started discovering resistance, and then the revival of the coalition. Is that essentially how it went?
Yeah. Basically, if you put yourself in the mind of somebody who's growing soybeans and corn, you figure this out, that you got this worm in your soil that's causing problems in the late 90s. Well, you know about it and you're going to manage it. So the seed companies are offering resistant varieties. Okay, check. You're going to buy one of those. You're going to put it in the ground. You're going to keep rotating with corn or whatever else you're rotating with. And you're going to get a resistant variety every year. You're going to rotate and you're going to kind of forget about it. I mean, you check, done, right? Well, the nematode wasn't done with the farmer. The farmer might have been done with a nematode, right? Yeah. So in that block of time, also, there's a whole new generation of farmers, right? So, I mean, we're talking a long period of time. Right. We're talking basically 2 decades. So there's new farmers. I mean, there's 20 years of new farmers coming on that, maybe you've never really considered what a threat it is because they just get genetic resistance. So, and they'll deal with it. So in this time frame, you have a situation where the yield loss is actually higher than it was in the 90s. Because the geography is way bigger, SCN's way more widespread, and the resistance that was really good at first, it's not as good anymore. And you don't have a lot of extra tools and you don't have a lot of extra awareness. So in 2015, we're looking at this, and there's a small group of us that really kind of spearheaded the effort, just looking around and our growers are just, they're suffering for this. So the first thing that happened is we started working a little bit with Syngenta. Syngenta helped very, very graciously. They paid for some survey research to get a sense of what was going on in the growers' minds. Yeah. Where do they rank SCN as a problem? How are they managing that sort of thing? And Syngenta, helped us get the survey results done, and it was staggering. So the growers knew less about SCN, knew the same or less about SCN as they did in the 1990s. And I don't fault the growers for that. Like it's our job to be the educators, right? I don't fault them for that. But we're all looking around at each other like, okay, we have to do something about this.
I always forget who said this quote, but I've said it so many times in this podcast, like that the greatest ally of plant pathogens, and it could be, extrapolated to stuff beyond plant pathogens, is our short-term memory, right? Like somebody was, I was talking, I think it was Marty Draper, and I was talking to him about wheat stem rust, and we were talking about how there's an alternate host to wheat stem rust in the UK, and it was like, a barberry host, and like they had eradicated barberry from the landscape, and in turn, it put in danger this slug, like a barberry slug. Oh, yeah. And so they were trying to bring back the barberry slug, so you're planting barberry again, and you can probably all see where that went. And
yeah.
But not apples to apples here, but
yeah, but it is true. You forget, you don't think about it, and new people come into the game. So going along with your barberry analogy, well, barberries are a beautiful plant that you might want to put around your house, right? Or a fence line, or like, well, you might not have the history to know that, hey, actually there's a reason that, So you walk away from, actively managing this SCN thing, and you're not really thinking about it. And all of a sudden it becomes twice the problem that it was in the past. So in 2015, we did that survey, and we got together, and it was a small group of us that were kind of spearheading this. We had a national SCN research conference. Okay. So we got a bunch of scientists together, and at that conference, we presented all the work, all the stuff that we knew. And there was all kinds of other things about SCN developments and resistance and research and all that. But what was important is we brought in as many people in the private sector or private sector representatives as we could. And so we sat down with a group of people from, like I mentioned Syngenta earlier, but Syngenta and BASF and Bayer and many of these other companies, try to get them in the room and to kind of figure out, is there a way we can work together on this? Because this SCN problem it's too big for one university. It's too big for one company. Sure. I mean, that's been documented that $1 to $1.5 billion lost annually to SCN, right? I mean, we're not doing the job. So there was interest in doing this, and I got to hand it to the North Central Soybean Research Program. So NCSRP gave us some funding to help kickstart the whole process. And what it ended up doing was creating this really significant, true public-private partnership where the soybean checkoff was contributing cash, and then many of these ag chemical companies were contributing cash, all around unified messaging about managing SCN.
Gotcha. And what was the message the second time around? So
the message the second time around, you remember the take the test, beat the pest?
Yeah.
there was another logo that was created, and it was built on this take the test, beat the pest.
Okay.
But there was a little what's your number kind of halo over it. Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole concept was that we wanted to make sure that growers understood that the resistance wasn't working. And the way that they could see that was they could do a soil test.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to increase awareness, and we wanted to get them in the ground and sample and see the problem. And then we wanted them to actively manage this again. So passive management would just be like, check that box, put it in the ground, but actively manage it would be like, okay, I'm going to, actually soil sample. I'm going to see how well this resistance is working or whatever. So 4 things. So under that logo, what's the number? Take the test, beat the pest. What's your number? It's pretty simple. It's a soil test. That's one. It's rotate to non-host crops. Well, that's simple unless you live in North Dakota, right? So it's geography's changed. So, rotate to a non-host crop. Dry beans are susceptible.
Yeah.
And then rotate your genetic resistance. So not just use genetic, but rotate your genetic resistance, right? And so there's Peking resistance or, a different type of resistance. So if you can get it, rotate to it. And then the last one was to consider nematicide protectant seed treatment or nematode protectant seed treatment.
Sam, could you give like a quick and dirty, you mentioned like 95% of soybean varieties at some point, or maybe even higher, were PI 88788 was a specific genetic, what word would you?
Let's call it source of resistance.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Source of resistance.
Yep.
And so you mentioned rotating these sources of resistance. Like, what has happened, since the reformation of the SCN coalition?
Yeah. Well, so 95% of the varieties, and maybe that's less now. I'm really hopeful that that's like 90 or 85% have that same source of resistance. But that means that 5, 10, or 15% have something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that something different in most cases is this thing called Peking, right? It's a different source of resistance. So it is not available in a ton of varieties, and it's not available necessarily in every maturity group evenly. But if you have really a problem with SCN, which many people do, if you do, and you can get a variety with Peking, it's probably going to be a lot more effective. And if you can feed the nematode something that it doesn't like to eat, well, the nematode's not going to be happy, and those numbers will drop and your yield will be better. And that's been demonstrated pretty broadly, pretty much everywhere. So that's been a change.
Yeah. And Greg took he always, a lot of the talks that I sat into, he was my advisor, partial advisor with Dr. Darren Mueller. So I sat in a lot of his talks, and he always used to say that SCN is like watching a train wreck in slow motion with the way that it was going with that single source of resistance versus like now branching out. So what has changed beyond that? So you mentioned like nematicidal seed treatments, like what is the recommendation now? Like if somebody is bought in with the SCN coalition, they've done these 4 things, they've taken the test, they have
rotated the crops. They're rotating.
So those are the 4 things that you guys
really.
Those are the suggestions basically.
Right. Yeah. So it's a part of the reason that we were able to create this public-private partnership was because there was a new emerging market for nematode protectant seed treatments, right? So if you're going to create a public-private partnership or really a partnership of anything, really, if you're going to partner in any way, you have to really understand what is the value, what is the benefit for each of the partners, right?
Yeah.
So we would ask ourselves, well, what does success look like for these university people? And we would ask, what does success look like for the ag chem industry? What does success look like for the ag media?
Yeah.
And if you can figure out what success looks like, well, maybe you can work together to find success in a common way, right? So really kind of simplistically, success for universities is that we educate and we're relevant,
Right.
Success for ag media is that they have a lot of views or hits or whatever. They're the source of information. And success for the ag chem industry is, they have these solutions, these tools, and they have to sell the tools, they have to place the tools. Well, they all kind of came together at this time frame because, NDSU and many universities, ISU, we want to be educators, and the ag media is like, they're on fire, but they're also taking some heat. Not everyone likes the media,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And, like I said, there's an emerging market with seed treatments, and there's also some emerging genetic resistance maybe too, right? Anyhow, so you have all these players together and you bring them together and you can wrap that message together in a piece. Okay. So back to the 4, right? So you've got the take the test, you've got the rotate to non-host crops and genetic resistance. So we had to be a little careful with the seed treatment piece because the seed treatments are a new tool.
Yes.
But they cost money as well.
Yeah.
So in the language, we want to support that. Like it's a new tool. It's an evolving market. And I would say that the seed treatments over time continue to get better and better and better. That's just typically what happens in chemicals as we go through, but they also cost the growers a lot of money. So we would say specifically, soil sample and rotate non-host crops and rotate your genetic resistance and consider a nematode protectant seed treatment.
And you've got those things ordered in a way that I, as an IPM specialist here at Iowa State, also
I'm going to say them over and over in that order, right? Yeah. So we had to add the word consider a nematode protectant seed treatment because, it's an investment by the grower. I mean, you pay for a variety, but you're not paying specifically for genetic resistance, right? So it's just a little bit of vernacular change, but everybody in the partnership bought into that messaging. And then, so we were unified, and that gives room for success for everyone. And once you're unified and you have all the strengths of the university, the private sector, the ag media, the soybean checkoff, you can move the needle really fast.
Yeah. You were telling me about some of the numbers that you guys were getting on all kinds of different media, both social media, videos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really compelling. So.
It's quite remarkable. So for a couple of years, we worked on building this partnership. You don't just do this overnight. Yeah. And I flew a lot. It was kind of remarkable. Yeah, flying to different company headquarters, flying to different universities, visiting with USB and CSRP.
Yeah.
Going back and forth on the messaging. How do you feel about this? Does this work? Will this work for you? Can you support this? That sort of thing. And we did that many, many times. And NCSRP and Syngenta kind of helped us in various ways right away, but pretty soon the other ag chem companies were supporting us financially. United Soybean Board began supporting us financially. And what ended up being like the launch point was in 2018, and we went to Commodity Classic. And at Commodity Classic, we timed up all these various things to hit at the same time. So the ag media was there. We had the Corn Soybean Digest magazine, which is a print magazine, right? Yeah. We had a 32-page insert about SCN, and that was paid for by the partnership, all the pieces of the partnership. We had tremendous amount of interviews at that time. There was a website with tons of downloadable resources. There was a training video. There were 2 professional quality videos available that we were playing all at once, all one hit. And that was really centered around last week of February, first week of March 2018, coinciding with Commodity Classic. And from there, we started building and building and building. So one of the things that I really enjoyed a lot, I mean, we did a lot of things, but this one I really liked was this Let's Talk Toads, right? So toads meaning nematodes, right?
Yep.
So we had a video series, and I suppose fortunate for us, the pandemic happened as we're starting to, put these things out there. So people were staying home a little more, but
and consuming a lot of social media.
Yeah, exactly. Process, So it's a series of 2.5 to 3.5 minute videos about SCN. And within the first month or two, I think there was 900,000 views. We built that up with a research collection filmed at Georgia with Melissa Mitchum, who's a nematologist there. I think within 12 months, it was maybe 2.1 million views, right?
Wow.
And at that's
a good turnaround.
Yeah. And at the same time, the press releases and things from the coalition are going crazy. So we, I believe by that time there was 35 million potential impressions in the ag media. And that it took me a second to wrap my head around what that meant. But a potential impression, it would be the opportunity for one person to see the article one time, right? That's one potential impression.
Right.
So we had 35 million in the ag media. And I don't know how many soybean growers there are, maybe 500, 600,000, something like that. So let's pretend there's 500,000 soybean growers, and that's our target, right?
Yep.
We're not advertising in USA Today or, whatever.
Right.
So that's enough for every soybean grower to see this message. What is it? 70 times?
Yeah.
Is that right? 70 times?
I have no idea.
70 times. Yeah.
I wish I was that good.
70. Yeah. So every soybean grower would have had the opportunity to see an SCN coalition message 70 times.
Huh.
It was remarkable.
Are you wondering which fungicides to use for a particular corn, soybean, or wheat problem? Check out the Crop Protection Network Fungicide Efficacy Guides. These guides can help you identify the best fungicides for the disease you are battling.
Going back to this partnership of private and public, and then some of the in-betweens as well, what do you think made this such a successful union of those things? I mean, is it just that, like you said, SCN is the most important thing, and it's, kind of regained its strength as a pathogen, let's say, over, between the late 1990s and the early 2000s. Yeah, what do you think made it such a good union of private and public?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a few things. But one of the things that you might consider is we had such an important opportunity or an important problem where we had to come together to capitalize on the opportunity. It was built for a partnership. Let me say this in a little bit different way. Let's pretend. Sure. Okay, let's pretend that, I don't know, let's pretend you're in Savannah, Georgia. Okay. You're in Savannah, Georgia, on the coast, beautiful area. And let's pretend you got this really cool island close by. What is it? Tybee Island? Is that right? Is that
I have no idea.
Let's pretend that you're in Savannah, Georgia, and there's a cool island that you want to develop and people want to live at. Sure. They want to go, whatever they do on the East Coast, surf. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I don't know. Hunt sharks. I don't know. Whatever it is. Let's pretend that
I'm sorry if you're from the East Coast.
No, I love the East Coast. I just don't go there enough to know what happens as much.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so let's pretend you're in a city and you've got this island close by and you want to do something with it. You want people to enjoy it. You want to turn it into a park. You want to put businesses or whatever. Well, no single entity is going to be able to do this.
Right.
So the city of Savannah probably has the money. They probably, through tax base or whatever, they probably have the money to help pay for it. But, they probably have a road crew that fixes potholes, right? They don't go building these massive bridges.
Sure.
And then you've got an engineering firm or firms, and they probably have the infrastructure and they probably have the ability to do this one specific thing really, really well, but they need support from the community to do it. And they need the financial investment. And then they both probably, because you're going to tax people a lot, presumably, you probably both need some political support. You need maybe some public support, right? So the opportunity is really high in this hypothetical area or whatever.
Yeah.
You got this whole island you can colonize or build, whatever kind of fancy things, beaches and competitions and, tax base and all that. You have to bring those two things together to build it. You have to have a public-private partnership to build this bridge. So the opportunity... The opportunity is there, but it will be completely unsuccessful if you don't come together and do it.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it seems like everybody, like you said, has kind of a mutual benefit, dog in the fight kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
The people win because they can go to the beach. The company wins because they can employ people, probably many that live in this, Savannah town, right, to do the work. It's a win-win. So this is kind of the situation that we're in. We have this thing that's causing $1.5 billion a loss every year. We have the ag chem companies, the ag seed and ag chem companies with solutions that they can provide, that can help. But maybe they don't have enough of the support through the public sector. And the public sector, they're educators, and they want to be relevant, but they also don't have any of the tools. And then you have the soybean checkoff, and they're looking out for the growers themselves. They want all that soybean checkoff to be a really high return on investment, so the soybean farmers make more money. That's the whole point, right? So we're in the situation with SCN where all of those things can come together for success. And if they don't come together for success, it's just another 1990s to 2015. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think, and I talked way too much about this hypothetically probably, but one of the things is that it was the right opportunity at the right time to come together. We needed each other.
Yeah.
We all needed each other. I think the other thing too is that we learned a lot from the first coalition. So the first coalition, it was great, really resounding success, but there were some things that didn't work so hot. And so some of the things done better in the second coalition were the feedback loops were a lot tighter.
Okay.
The egg chem companies put in some money directly to support it. And we became really, really tight with the egg media. And it also maybe helped that, the 1990s and the 2020s are a little different. We have social media now, right? Things like that. We were able to capitalize on that too.
Yeah. Along those lines, I got a question about, would you have any advice to somebody, maybe not even the same crop, same system, but similar problem in that they've got this kind of, whether it's a pathogen or an insect, it could be anything. What advice would you give to somebody kind of who was in your shoes looking at SCN and restarting the SCN coalition? What would your advice be to somebody? Because you're saying I know that there was a lot of work on your part and on the part of the people that you were working with in private industry to actually make this happen. You guys needed each other, right? But somebody, I'm assuming, the folks who were directly involved in getting this thing on its wheels. What advice would you give to somebody in that regard?
Yeah, I think
it could be in grapes or something for all we know, but if there was a similar opportunity, what advice would you have for somebody?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to find out what success looks like for the person you're sitting across the table from. I mean, if I'm sitting across the table from a grape enthusiast and there's a wine grower to my left and maybe there's, I don't know, a raisin maker or whatever, to the right, is there a way that we can find common success? And we can't find common success unless we all talk about what it actually looks like to us. And then we can probably do it. So I would say almost any public-private partnership, in my experience, what success looks like to you is the most important question to the person sitting across from you.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but that really is it.
But sometimes it needs to be oversimplified. I sat in a seminar yesterday where somebody was talking about improving your writing, and they said, you know what the best way to improve your writing is? Make it so that the person reading your writing can understand it. And it sounds really simple, but at the same time, it's an easy thing to overlook.
It's pretty simple. Yeah.
Sam, before I kind of start getting into wrap-up questions, I wanted to ask you, you had an award you were telling me about called the Silver Anvil.
Right. Yeah.
What was that? And what does
Silver
it entail?
Anvil's amazing. And so I might, before I get into the details of the Silver Anvil, the only thing I would say is that we won the Silver Anvil because of the statistical differences this coalition created.
So who won the Silver Anvil? Yeah. The coalition itself?
Yeah, the SCN coalition won the Silver Anvil. And so we did all this stuff, going back one step, we did all this stuff, the radio, the media, and all that. So one of the things that was really critical here was that the survey that Syngenta helped fund that we designed in 2015 was repeated in 2020. And we were able to then statistically compare what the growers knew, what they were doing, their active management. And we were able to show that we had statistically increased multiple components of active management. And the economic power for the growers, the economic improvement for the growers was hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's an amazing data point there, right? That we did all this, the partnership did it all, and we were able to change national management of this thing. And we were able to contribute, save them basically hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. So that was that piece. That's what led to the awards, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. So the Silver Anvil. So I didn't have a clue what this was. I've never heard of it.
Nope.
So there's a group called the Public Relations Society of America, and they're an enormous group. We as pathologists, we deal with American Phytopathological Society, right? wow, this is magnitudes in order bigger. It's public
Oh.
relations, everything.
Yeah.
Public Relations Society of America. So we have a public relations firm that's helping with the coalition. There's a point people, and those point people are working for this company, Morgan Myers, right?
Okay.
So Morgan Myers is working with us on the marketing and helping with the coalition. So we're pulling all this together. So Morgan Myers is kind of in this area of Public Relations Society of America. They're members and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, I'm not sure exactly how it worked, nominated, I guess. We were awarded, we were invited. I'm not exactly sure, to the award ceremony. Okay. So you've seen the Grammys or the Oscars, right?
This is like the Grammys of public relations.
It's literally red carpet. And it's in Manhattan, New York City. Like it's at the Edison Theater in New York City. Like it's the big deal, right? So literally red carpet. You walk into the room and you have people with Manhattans, like the drink Manhattans, waiting for you. It's lots of glitz and glamour. And I was wearing a full suit and I felt really underdressed.
I was going to say, what were you wearing? It seems the right question to ask in this situation.
The only suit I own. At any rate, so there's 4 of us there, so myself and 3 others. And we, like the Grammys or the Oscars or whatever, they go up and there's categories and they have an envelope and they open the envelope and they read the winner. And the SCN Coalition won Issues Management, which is, I don't know, the equivalent of like, I don't know, whatever, Best Supporting Actor or something.
Yeah.
And the runner-up was I don't know if I should say the name, but a household name cruise company that everyone would know.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Think, Carnival, Norwegian, right?
My brain is.
Yep. I mean, so it's one of them. They were and you just think about that for a second. So this little ragtag operation, not a company, a partnership of university scientists and, Ag Media and the others I mentioned, Soybean Checkoff and the, Ag Seed Company. They, as a partnership with probably infinitesimal amount of funding compared to one of those major cruise companies, won. And it's remarkable. It's a testament to how a group working together, leveraging their own strengths, can make an enormous change.
Yeah. Man.
So, really, really fun. It was really fun.
Yeah. Well, this kind of plays perfectly into the first kind of wrap up ending question I wanted to ask you was, I mean, you mentioned like the huge impact that the SCN Coalition had on soybean growers and their profits. I mean, enough so to win this prestigious award. What do you think is, the first question I wanted to ask you was like, what do you think is the future going forward? Like, obviously, probably learning from the mistakes of the previous SCN Coalition into this coalition, we probably won't see the SCN Coalition dissipate or disintegrate or whatever word you want to use. But like, I don't know, what do you see as the future of the SCN Coalition? And
right. So the SCN Coalition, this go round has already outlived the first one by 2 or 3 lifespans of the first one, right? Part of the reason I think is that there's just, it's a broader partnership, and the private sector and the Soybean Checkoff are both contributing financial support, not just one, right? Mm-hmm. It's broader.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think, really well managed. And I'm talking a lot about the SCN Coalition, but I have transitioned away from a leadership role in the last year. And I think that's critical. So like, you can't just have one person, one idea, one leader all the time, right? That never works. And I was never doing it alone. I have great people around me.
Yes.
But I was running point for a period of time, and it was really time for me to let somebody else run point. And that is wonderful, because there's kind of, there's probably 4 to 7 people kind of in the leadership circle now, and they have tremendous ideas that I never had. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think those 2 things, that transitional leadership and then the broad support, are really helpful. Will it last forever? No, it probably won't. Will it evolve? Yeah, it's going to evolve. And 30 years from now or 20 years from now, maybe a third coalition starts when something else changes.
Sure. That's my next question. What do you think? I mean, what do you think will change with Soybean Cyst Nematode and its management? I mean, obviously, we don't actually know what might change, but I mean, given what we know about SCN, given what we know about those 4 things that you mentioned were the management tools and the actions you want farmers to take now. Like, I don't know, what do you think is the future of SCN management? Because eventually something will probably break again, and we'll be on to something else. What do you think might happen?
I think if you look at maybe a 20-year time frame, which would be the gap between the first and the second coalition, I would imagine that we'll have multiple new tools, and I would imagine multiple new tools will no longer be effective. Right. So the nematode, no matter what we throw at it, we're going to have some success, and it might be fantastic success, but it's not going to be permanent success.
Yes.
And so what I hope, although I'm not super confident, is that we are able to continue the educational piece through that time frame, through those next 20 years, so people are watching and learning and looking out. So when one of those tools breaks, people are aware quicker, and they can adapt quicker, and they don't have to suffer some of the yield loss that they did over the last 20 years. That's what I'm hoping for.
I've talked to a lot of people about, like just population dynamics and genetics and what we understand about organisms on a genetic level or on a, molecular DNA level. And I have high hopes for that, I guess, but we'll see what happens. So, with that, Sam, I mean, the silver anvil kind of is like the answer to this question, but I mean, like, I don't know, if you were to be talking to a member of the public, somebody at Thanksgiving dinner, a relative who doesn't know what the SCN coalition is and what it does, how would you sum that up to somebody just really quickly?
Yeah. I would say that we formed a partnership that saved soybean farmers money across the entire United States, and that we learned in the process, and the farmers learned in the process, and we all pulled together, and we're making it easier for the farmers.
All right, Sam, at this point, you have the floor for any acknowledgments you want to make. It's a hard ask since there's a lot of people, but go for it.
It is a hard ask. So I think the first thing I would say is that we really need to acknowledge the breadth of the people involved and the organizations involved. So we've got 9 ag seed chem companies that are important. The ag media has been fantastic. There's a group of them. 24 universities, 26 universities, somewhere in there, depending on the year, have contributed. And then the soybean checkoff is just fantastic. North Central Soybean Research Program, USB, and all the state QSSBs, right, that are engaged, like the North Dakota Soybean Council for that example. So with the people that have kind of been in this leadership circle, and I'm going to feel awful if I forget someone, but this has never been a one-person show. It's always been a group, right? So Greg Tilka at Iowa State has been instrumental. Albert Tenuta up in Ontario, Carl Bradley in Kentucky, Melissa Mitchum in Georgia has been really helpful. Caitlin Bissonette, while she was at Missouri, and she's in cotton now, but she's still engaged. And George Bird at Michigan State, he had some of the early ideas that were great. And then we've transitioned the leadership, like I mentioned. Greg Tilka and I have kind of stepped back, and then Dylan Mangel at Nebraska and Horacio Lopez-Nicora at Ohio State have picked up some of the leadership roles that we used to have. And there's still a big group of people around them, and it's great. I think, I don't know if I want to get into all the kind of leadership on the company side, but I would give a shout out to Ed Anderson, who was at North Central Soybean Research Program when the coalition was started. He was instrumental in helping with the partnership, envisioning some of that. And then there's some great people in the private sector too. And, I mentioned the one person I might mention right away is just Syngenta helped us initially with that market research that kind of kicked the whole thing off. And that was really helpful. Pella Peterson, who was at Ohio State, right, was at Syngenta at that time, and he was instrumental in that. And then from there, it just snowballed. And there's literally hundreds of people that I would love to thank.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
Well, great. I hope that they all hear this and that they all feel the love.
Yeah, and if I didn't say your name, oh my God, I'm sorry. I still love you.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much.
If someone wants to learn more about the SCN Coalition, what's just Google it, or is there like an SCNcoalition.org? What's
it is the SCN Coalition.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yep. The SCN Coalition.com.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that,
Thank you very much. It's great to be back, Ed.
It's great to have you in person this time.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Again, so.
Yeah, it's way more fun in the room. I love it.
It is a little hot in here, but it's more fun.
We're surviving.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Hope you learned a ton. We'll see you next time.
ICDeadPlants bridges the gap between plant science research and the impact it has on our daily lives. It is brought to you by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center, which are both partially supported by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. For more information on today's topic or other pest management issues, check out our show notes, cropprotectionnetwork.org or ncipmc.org. Remember, this information is for entertainment purposes only. The statements made in this podcast should be interpreted within the limited context of the particular topics being discussed. Contact your state extension program for local information on pest management. For the full non-discrimination statement or for accommodation inquiries, go to cropprotectionnetwork.org/about. Music written and recorded by fellow plant pathologist Sean Toporek. Thank you for listening to ICDeadPlants.